The envelope was still warm from my hands when she tossed it onto the counter like junk mail. "Is this supposed to mean something?" she asked, her eyes flicking down at the single folded page inside. My fingers were still trembling. Not from rage, I'm not that kind of man, but from that cold, sick ache that comes when hope has finally bled out. I didn't say a word. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. She opened it, slowly, as if expecting confetti or some petty jab. Her eyes danced across the paper. I watched her brow twitch, then settle. Her mouth curled up, not in surprise, but in amusement. "A list," she said, holding it up like it was a child's drawing. "You made a list of everything you've done for me? Are you serious right now?" I looked at the paper in her hand. 17 bullet points. Just 17. I'd written them in the middle of the night after she told me, without emotion, without a pause, "Your happiness isn't my concern." It had taken me hours to condense years into those 17 lines. Not big gestures. Just small, quiet things. Waiting in the cold for her when her flight was delayed. Fixing her mother's garage door on a Sunday morning. Relearning how to cook when she went gluten-free. Holding her hand during her second biopsy, even when she said she didn't want company. The things you do when you love someone and expect nothing back. But she read it like it was a joke. Like I was performing some desperate theater. "I didn't ask you to do these things," she said. "If you needed a thank you parade for basic decency, that's on you." That's when I realized. She meant it. She meant everything she ever said when she brushed me off, rolled her eyes, shrugged away my touch. I used to believe there was a kind person underneath the sarcasm, someone exhausted, maybe hurting, someone who just needed time. But there was no mask, no buried softness, just truth, the kind that doesn't scream, doesn't curse, doesn't explode, but slowly corrodes everything around it. She left the list on the table, went back to her phone, started scrolling TikTok while I stood there like a ghost. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake and stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic buzz of her humidifier, thinking how absurd it was that I'd spent so many years trying to fix something that had been broken by design. I didn't leave. Not yet. But something in me did. And in the days that followed, I started quietly withdrawing, like a man lowering himself out of a burning house, careful not to make a sound. She didn't even notice I was gone. Not at first. But she will. The silence the next morning wasn't different, not at first. It was the usual kind. Two people moving around each other like shadows. She drank her almond milk latte from her favorite chipped mug with Queen Energy written on it. I sat by the window and pretended to scroll through news on my phone. I knew she wouldn't ask what I was reading, just like she wouldn't notice I hadn't spoken a single word since last night. But then, at exactly 8:07 a.m., she said something. By the way, she called out from the hallway, rifling through her closet. "Don't forget I have that dinner next Friday with the fundraising board. You promised to come." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't hear her, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel the compulsion to respond. I didn't nod. I didn't grunt. I just stared out the window at a squirrel burying a piece of stale bread near the rose bushes. And the silence that followed? That was new. Tense. A slight hesitation in her footsteps told me she noticed. But she didn't push. Later that day, she texted me, "Did you pick up the dry cleaning?" I didn't answer. Then, I still didn't reply. That evening, I came home later than usual. No explanation. She was already curled up on the couch watching some reality show where people pretended to love each other for prize money. Fitting. She didn't look up when I walked in, but I felt her glance, that flash of confusion when someone you've always controlled suddenly shifts under your grip. Dinner wasn't waiting for me. It rarely was. But this time, I didn't ask if she wanted anything. I made myself scrambled eggs. Didn't ask if she wanted some. Didn't offer tea. I just ate at the counter in silence. "Did you seriously ignore my texts?" she finally asked, remote still in her hand. I looked at her, not through her, but at her. I saw the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth. Annoyance? Uncertainty? "I was busy," I said flatly, even though she knew I wasn't. It was the truth, just not the one she was used to hearing. "What's going on with you lately?" And I swear, there was a flicker, the briefest one, of genuine curiosity. Maybe even worry. But it vanished the moment I replied, "Nothing." That word felt like a weapon. Because for years, whenever she said it, it meant, leave me alone. Now, for the first time, I used it. I went to bed early that night. Left her on the couch. No kiss on the cheek. No, good night, babe. None of the little things I'd clung to like emotional lint. And while I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, counting blades instead of thoughts, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. I felt strangely free. Like a man stepping barefoot onto cold tile after years of walking on eggshells. The next morning, I deleted the reminder on my calendar for her fundraising dinner. She hadn't earned my time. Not anymore. And when I saw her staring at me across the table the next day, head tilted ever so slightly, I knew she was beginning to understand. Something had shifted, but she had no idea just how far it would go. By the third day, her voice had changed. Not drastically. Loretta wasn't one for emotional theatrics, but the edges of her sentences were getting sharper, as though each syllable was being cut from a place she wasn't used to bleeding. The silence between us had become loud enough to echo, and I noticed the way she looked at me when I moved around the house. Not curious anymore. Not irritated. Suspicious. Like she couldn't quite recognize me. Like I'd been swapped for someone else, and she was trying to catch me in the act of being different. That morning, while I buttered a slice of toast I didn't even want, she leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. So, is this a phase, or are you just trying to prove something? I didn't answer at first. I focused on the toast, watching the butter melt into every uneven corner like it mattered. Finally, I looked up and said quietly, what would I even be trying to prove? She tilted her head like she was analyzing a specimen. I don't know, Wallace. You tell me. You've been walking around like a ghost. Ignoring me. Avoiding conversations. What are you hoping I'll do, Big? I took a breath. Not deep. Not shaky. Just enough to slow my thoughts. No, I replied, placing the toast on a napkin. I'm just tired. She scoffed. Tired of what? Having a wife who actually works for a living? Who's busy running a nonprofit while you automate spreadsheets in a basement? There it was, the first crack in her voice. It was almost comforting. For years, she had masked contempt with indifference. This, at least, was honest. I didn't rise to it. I didn't defend my job or remind her how many times I'd sat in those fundraising galas with plastic smiles and stiff collars while she schmoozed with wealthy donors like she was auditioning for a part in their legacy. I just finished my toast, wiped the counter, and walked away. Later that evening, I found her standing by the bookshelf in the living room, the one she never dusted because she thought I liked that kind of thing. She was flipping through one of my journals. I hadn't written in it in months, but the cover was worn, the spine nearly broken from years of recording quiet thoughts that I never had the courage to say aloud. What are you doing? I asked. She looked up, caught. Not ashamed. Just annoyed. I was looking for the warranty folder. For the dryer. Must have grabbed the wrong thing. She placed the journal down, too quickly, too roughly, like it might burn her hand. I knew she was lying. And I realized then that she was starting to feel it, the unfamiliar unease of not knowing what I was thinking. I used to narrate my emotions like a man begging to be heard. Now, I kept them tucked inside like locked drawers. That night, she climbed into bed earlier than usual. No phone. No TV on. Just the sound of sheets rustling and her sighing heavily, as though her presence alone was supposed to draw something out of me. Are you okay? She asked softly, somewhere between real concern and subtle control. I'm fine, I replied, staring at the ceiling. You don't seem fine. I turned my head toward her then. The dim light from her bedside lamp made her look softer than she was. You once told me my happiness wasn't your concern, I said. Her lips parted slightly. She didn't deny it. Well, I whispered. I finally listened. I turned back over, pulled the blanket to my chin, and felt the sting in her silence. She'd been sure I would fold. She had always been sure. But people don't realize how quiet men fall apart. No screaming. No slammed doors. Just slow, irreversible withdrawal, and when it's complete, there's nothing left to reach for. The next morning, her side of the bed was empty before sunrise. She didn't say goodbye. But for the first time in a long time, neither did I. On Sunday, the gray one went missing, the shirt. The one with the soft collar, the faded pocket, and the tiny bleach stain near the hem that looked like a map of Florida. Loretta always hated it. Said it made me look like someone's disappointing little brother. I loved it, though. It was mine. It was worn in all the right places, and on weekends, it made me feel like I didn't have to try so hard. I searched for it that morning, low-key, quiet. Not in a rush. I went through my drawers, the hamper, the drying rack, even the linen closet. No sign. I didn't ask her where it was. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing I'd noticed. But something gnawed at me. It wasn't like her to throw things out, not without a scolding first. At noon, I heard her in the guest room, a place she hadn't touched in months. The door was half closed, her back to me, arms moving quickly. I waited, hidden behind the hallway wall, silent. She was stuffing something into one of the drawers of the desk we used to share before she needed more creative space and claimed the entire sunroom for herself. I heard a key turn. That drawer hadn't been locked since before we got married. She didn't see me. I didn't say anything. I just stepped quietly back into the kitchen and pretended I hadn't witnessed anything at all. But the sound of that little key clicking into place, it stuck with me the entire day. Something about it felt too intentional. Like she wasn't locking something away. She was hiding it from me. In the evening, she made an unexpected move. She came into the den and dropped 2 grocery bags on the table. I bought almond milk. You said we were out. I looked at her, blinking slowly. Loretta hadn't done the grocery run in years. Not even during the pandemic. She claimed the aisles gave her decision fatigue. Oh, I said, offering a tight smile. Thanks. She stood there awkwardly, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Then, out of nowhere, she laughed. Loud and strange, like she was trying to fill the silence with sound. I hadn't heard her laugh in weeks. Not like that. It was the kind of laugh people do when they're nervous but pretending not to be. I also bought that granola you like. The one with the flax stuff. I stared at her. She was watching me too closely. Her face was too open, too performative. It didn't feel like kindness. It felt like surveillance. That night, while she slept beside me, I quietly got out of bed and padded down the hallway with my phone light guiding the way. I crouched next to the guest room desk, reached for the bottom drawer, and found the lock still in place. Of course it was. But I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I checked above the doorframe. Back in college, she used to hide spare keys there. Sure enough, taped under a thin strip of molding, it was still there. Rusted a little, dusty, but it fit. And it turned. Inside the drawer, I found a notebook, not one of mine. It was thick and leather-bound. The kind of thing you'd expect to find full of recipes or poetry. But it wasn't that. The first page was blank. The second had a name, a man's name, and a list of dates. Some of them matched days she claimed to be at late meetings or out with colleagues. Some of them were just marked with a simple note, confirmed. I stared at the pages as my pulse started pounding. My ears felt hot, my skin prickled. I didn't go further. I didn't need to not yet. I relocked the drawer, returned the key, and walked back to bed. She was turned away from me, breathing slow, her back exposed beneath the hem of her tank top. She looked peaceful. I lay awake next to her for hours, blinking into the dark. That shirt? It wasn't about the shirt. It was about her finally slipping. And now I was awake, fully awake, in a way she hadn't expected. She thought I was unraveling. But I had just begun to pull on the first thread. She hummed in the shower that morning. That's what got to me the most, not the drawer, not the notebook, not the dates and initials etched in her tidy, looping handwriting like appointments. It was the humming, the carefree melody drifting through the cracked bathroom door as if nothing at all had shifted, as if I hadn't laid in bed all night wondering whether the woman beside me was orchestrating something I hadn't yet fully grasped. It was some pop song from years ago, one we used to sing along to in the car, windows down, long before we became strangers. Now, hearing it from her lips, it sounded alien. Wrong. Like a song someone else was borrowing, someone who didn't deserve to hum it. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor with my hands between my knees. My mind was replaying the drawer, the notebook, the name I didn't recognize, the dates I half remembered. I wasn't angry yet, not in the way people mean it. What I felt was a quiet dread, a crawling sensation in my chest, like I was being slowly smothered by the realization that I might have been nothing more than set dressing in my own marriage. She walked into the room a few minutes later, towel around her neck, skin flushed from the heat. She gave me a once-over, her eyes scanning my face as if I was the one keeping secrets. "You look like you didn't sleep again," she said casually, rubbing her hair. "I didn't. Work stuff." I paused. "Something like that." She didn't push. Of course she didn't. Loretta only asked questions when she already knew the answers, and this time, she was trying not to draw attention to the fact that I was no longer predictable. She built her routines around my compliance, my eagerness to please, my desperate hope that if I just loved her a little harder, she'd eventually soften. But I wasn't in that place anymore. I was watching her now. I was cataloging. That afternoon, while she was gone, allegedly at a spa appointment gifted by one of her fundraising friends, I stayed home. Normally I'd be at work, but I'd taken the day off quietly. No announcement. Just a calendar block labeled private. And with the house to myself, I returned to the drawer. This time, I read further. Page after page, all in that same meticulous script. Lists of check-ins, initials paired with locations, DH, hotel bar, downtown, MG, parking lot behind the museum, CL, canceled, rescheduled. The pages weren't full of emotion, no hearts, no gushing. Just notes. Like meeting minutes. There were no explicit confessions. Nothing to scream, affair, in bold red letters. But it didn't need to be explicit. This wasn't a diary of love. This was a schedule. An archive of experiences. And I was nowhere in it. Except one entry, dated nearly 2 years back. WS, caught watching from the hallway again. Smile too forced. Must keep better track of timing. That stopped me cold. She had written about me. W.S. Wallace. Me. She knew I saw her that day, standing outside our bedroom, listening while she laughed too loudly on a phone call she wouldn't explain. I'd walked in and asked who it was, and she'd said, just a donor. But she'd noticed me watching. She'd noticed everything. And she hadn't cared. This notebook wasn't just a log. It was control. I closed it gently. I placed it back exactly how I found it. I relocked the drawer, replaced the key above the doorframe, and went to the living room to sit with my thoughts, not with rage, not even with sadness, but with a strange calm that terrified me. That evening, she walked through the front door carrying a lavender bag from a boutique I didn't recognize. She was glowing, content. She kissed my cheek, something she hadn't done in weeks, and asked if I wanted Thai or Mexican for dinner. Surprise me, I said without looking up. She nodded, then said it casually, with a grin. You've been so weird lately. It's kind of cute. Mysterious. Maybe I like it. I forced a laugh. She didn't realize it yet, but the game had already changed. And the version of me she had grown used to, the man who asked too often, apologized too quickly, forgave without conditions, was slipping quietly out of frame. And in his place? Someone who no longer needed her approval to breathe. I changed the locks on a Thursday afternoon. She was at one of her networking brunches, the kind where people drink Prosecco at noon and talk about charity like it's an accessory. I had the guy from the hardware store install the new deadbolt. I asked for something subtle, same color, same finish. Nothing too obvious. I didn't plan to lock her out. Not yet. But I needed to do something that was mine. Something she didn't know. Something that shifted the power, even just a little. When I heard the old lock click out of place and the new one settle in, I felt it, that weird flutter of quiet rebellion. Like I'd adjusted something small in the foundation of the house, something only I could see. A secret shift in the gravity. I half expected her to notice right away. Maybe she'd wiggle the key, glance down, and realize it slid indifferently. But she didn't. That evening, she came home in heels that clicked too loudly against the hardwood, dropped her purse by the door like always, and said she was craving pad thai again. No pause. No question about the door. But her eyes, they were scanning me more lately. Subtle things. She lingered longer when I passed behind her. She stared at the back of my head when I was on my laptop. I think she was starting to suspect something was shifting, but she couldn't figure out what. That night, while she scrolled through her phone beside me on the couch, she laughed, not like before, but awkwardly. Almost forced. I glanced over. She held her phone out toward me. Look, she said, this guy in my office matched with someone who looks exactly like you. He thought it was you at first. Isn't that hilarious? It wasn't. The profile on her screen was blurry, but I recognized the outline of the photo. It was a picture of me from a wedding years ago. My cousin's wedding, actually, someone must have posted it publicly. Someone had used it as a fake dating profile. I blinked slowly. That's me. She laughed again. No way. Really? God. That's wild. What are the odds? I looked at her face, at the tension behind the smirk. She knew. She'd known it was me. She was watching to see how I'd react, to see if I'd panic, if I'd fold. I guess you'll have to report it, she said, eyes glittering. I already did, I replied. 2 weeks ago. She went quiet. For a second, just 1 second, I saw it. That flicker of fear, of uncertainty, of not knowing what cards I was holding anymore. She stood up abruptly and said she needed to take a bath. Said her neck was killing her. She left her phone on the couch, screen still lit. I watched her walk out of the room. I waited until the water started running. And then I picked up her phone. I didn't scroll. I didn't snoop. I just opened the camera and took a picture of myself, sitting on the couch, dead-eyed, profile facing the same direction as the photo from the dating app. I left it in her photo roll. No caption. No explanation. Then I placed her phone back exactly how she left it. I didn't do it to accuse her. I wasn't trying to start a war. But I wanted her to know, I see you. And I wanted to watch her figure out just how much I already knew. That weekend, she became overly sweet. She brought home pastries from that pretentious cafe she once said I was too plain for. She complimented my energy, said she liked how calm I'd become lately. But the edges of her voice were fraying. She thought she was the only one who could play quiet games. She had no idea how much I learned in silence. It was during a thunderstorm that I decided to ask it. I'd been waiting for the right moment, or more accurately, the wrong one. A moment she wouldn't expect. A moment where her guard would be loose, like a rope coming undone in the dark. It came late Friday night, when the sky outside had turned violent and the electricity flickered just enough to dim the entire living room into soft, cinematic gray. She was curled on the couch beneath the blue blanket she only brought out when she wanted to appear vulnerable. I was sitting on the armchair, watching the lightning tear through the sky behind her. She was scrolling aimlessly on her phone again. She did that more often now, not really reading, not really watching, just swiping, like she was afraid of stillness. You ever wonder, I said quietly, what it would be like if we hadn't met? The question wasn't planned. Not exactly. But the silence that followed was. She looked up. What? If we'd never gotten married, I said, keeping my tone calm. Where do you think you'd be? Right now. This year. This exact moment. She blinked slowly, like she hadn't expected me to speak at all. I don't know. That's a weird question. Is it? Yes, Wallace. It is. We're married. We have a life. What kind of question is that? I leaned back into the chair. Just curious. Seems like lately, I'm not exactly the center of your universe. She scoffed. Oh, please. Not this again. But her hand that always danced so effortlessly across her phone, it stopped moving. I tilted my head slightly. You never answered. Where would you be? She exhaled, dragging the blanket tighter around herself. Probably in New York. Working at a proper foundation. Living in a high-rise. Traveling. I don't know. Independent. I let the word linger between us. Independent. That's what she always told people. That she was strong and independent. That I was sweet. Harmless. Supportive. Like I was a plush toy she kept around for comfort, but never wanted to take outside. She watched my face for a reaction, but I gave her nothing. That's what unnerved her now, not what I said, but what I didn't. I used to flinch at every sharp word, scramble to fix things before they got worse. Now I just let her speak. Let her fill the room with her noise. You want to leave, Wallace? She asked, voice brittle. Is that it? No, I replied. If I wanted to leave, I would have walked out a long time ago. Then what is all this? All what? She sat up straighter. You're different. You're not talking. You're not asking. You're not anything. I stood up slowly, walked to the window. The thunder was louder now, low and trembling through the floorboards. I just stopped trying to convince someone to love me. She stared at me, lips parted, completely silent for the first time in hours. And in that silence, I could feel her unraveling a little more, not because I'd accused her, but because I hadn't. Because I hadn't even tried to trap her. That was the real shift. She knew I knew something. She just couldn't figure out how much. Later that night, she left the room without a word. But not before she checked her phone twice. Not before she slid her purse closer to her side. Not before she gave me that one, long, unreadable look, the kind you give a painting that might not actually be abstract, but you're too afraid to admit you don't understand it. I waited until I heard the door to the guest room close. Then I walked into the kitchen, pulled out a small black notebook of my own, and opened it to a page marked 7. Under it, I wrote, She deflects when I'm calm. She panics when I'm silent. She lies when she thinks I already believe her. I closed the notebook and smiled for the first time in weeks, because the next morning I'd ask her one more question, one she'd never expect. She was making coffee when I asked. It was early, too early for conversation in our house, especially the kind that mattered. The kitchen window was still fogged from the morning air, and the only sound was the slow drip of her pour-over filter and the faint ticking of the wall clock I'd never liked. Loretta stood barefoot, robe knotted tight, half asleep, but alert enough to brace for anything. We hadn't spoken since the storm, since the question, since the look. I stood in the doorway, hands in the pockets of my hoodie, trying to hold the moment still before it shattered. Do you know when you stopped liking me? I asked. She didn't turn around at first, just froze, hand hovering over the sugar jar. What? You heard me, I said, softly. Not when you stopped loving me. When you stopped liking me. She stood there for a few seconds too long. Then she slowly turned, eyes narrowed, mouth parted like she'd expected a different question entirely. I don't know, she muttered. Why are you asking that? Because I used to care about the answer, I said. But now, I just need to hear you say it. She looked at me, really looked, and for once, there was no sarcasm behind her eyes. No smugness. Just exhaustion. And something else. Maybe regret. Maybe relief. It was gradual, she said finally. You were just always there. Predictable. And I guess I got used to not appreciating it. I nodded. That's fair, I said. You forgot what it cost me to show up for you. And I forgot how to show up for myself. She blinked, but didn't deny it. That was the closest to the truth we'd ever stood in together. I walked over to the kitchen table and placed a thin envelope on it. No drama. No note. Just a single page inside, a printed notice from my lawyer. The house title transfer. My signature already on it. The beginning of a new chapter that didn't involve whispered accusations or matching towels no one used. I'm not angry, I said. I don't hate you. I just don't need to do this anymore. Her lips parted. You're leaving. I already left, I said, stepping back. I just took longer to pack. She sat down at the table and didn't speak. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. That was the part one wasn't ready for. She just nodded, like a woman who had finally run out of performance. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. The new lock gleamed under the soft light. And then I opened the door and stepped out into a crisp, sunlit morning. Outside, everything felt impossibly quiet, but not the kind of silence that weighs on you. It was light, spacious, like the sound of possibility stretching out for miles. I didn't have a destination. I didn't even pack a suitcase. All I had was a small duffel, a car with half a tank, and the name of a cabin rental a friend once recommended. A place with no cell signal and no reason to check my email. As I drove out of the neighborhood, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The house looked the same, but I didn't. And somewhere inside me, I knew. For the first time in a very long time, I belonged to myself. That was enough. That was everything.